I used to think family was meant to keep you safe. I was wrong. My sister's hands tangled in my hair like talons. Before I could yell, she drove my head into the wall. The snap rang down the vacant hall. Pain burst behind my eyes, sharp, blinding. I collapsed onto the floor, my cheek against the cold hardwood, blood slick and warm along my temple. Emily knelt down, her face inches from mine. Her perfume, the pricey one our parents gave her for Christmas, flooded my lungs as she murmured, "You don't deserve anything. You never did." Then she rose, straightened her blouse, and walked off. Her heels tapped the floor, calm and unhurried, like she hadn't just left her sister bleeding and barely awake. She believed no one would ever find out. She believed she had won. What Emily didn't know was that someone stood watching from the dark. Someone who had promised our dying grandfather they would protect me. Someone who recorded it all. And when that person stepped into the lawyer's office the next morning, everything satisfying begins with the truth finally being seen. My name is Sandra Johnson. I'm 35 years old and I work as a care coordinator at a senior center in Portland, Oregon. I've built my career helping elderly patients through the most fragile chapters of their lives. I thought I understood loneliness. I thought I understood what it meant to feel invisible. But I didn't truly understand until I went home to bury my grandfather. The day I got promoted to manager, I called my mother to share the news. I was so excited my hands trembled as I dialed. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice distracted. "That's nice, dear," she said, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Did you hear Emily just closed a huge deal? Your father and I are taking her to dinner this weekend to celebrate." She didn't ask about my promotion. She didn't say congratulations. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. I'm used to this. What I've never understood is why. As long as I can remember, my family has treated me like a stranger they're obligated to tolerate. Missed calls that were never returned. Family gatherings I only learned about after they happened through photos posted on Facebook. Birthday cards I sent that were never acknowledged. I spent years wondering what I did wrong. What awful thing I must have said or done to make my own parents look at me with such coldness in their eyes. My younger sister Emily has always been the star of our family. She's 32, beautiful, charming, successful in real estate. When she enters a room, my parents light up like she's the sun itself. When I walk in, they glance at me like they're checking whether a door was left open. 3 years ago, something strange happened. My grandfather called me at midnight, his voice shaking. "Sandra," he said, "Emily told me you don't want to see me anymore. She said, you think I'm a burden." My heart nearly stopped. I had never said anything like that. I love my grandfather more than anyone in the world. "Grandpa, that's not true." I told him, I would never say that. "I love you." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know, sweetheart. I know you. That's why I called." He never explained what made him doubt Emily's words, but something in his voice that night stayed with me. When Grandpa passed away, I drove home to help sort through his belongings. The house felt hollow without him. But what surprised me was the warmth I received from Martha, his elderly neighbor. She was the only one who truly seemed glad I was there. "Your grandfather mentioned you constantly," Martha said, her gentle eyes taking me in. "He said you were the only truthful one in that family." She hesitated, a sad shadow crossing her face. "He asked me to watch out for you if anything ever happened. He was concerned about something." I thanked her politely, but her words rattled me in ways I couldn't explain. Back inside the house, I noticed Emily acting off. She kept looking toward Grandpa's office where he stored important papers. Later, I caught her murmuring to our mother in the kitchen. "I've handled everything," Emily said, her tone low and tense. "She won't be a problem." Our mother nodded, visibly relieved. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart racing. What were they talking about? That night, I overheard Emily on the phone, her voice cool and assured. The lawyer won't question anything. I've been preparing for this for months. Something was deeply wrong. I felt it in my bones. Unable to sleep, I went to Grandpa's old cabinet searching for keepsakes. Behind a loose board in the back, I found a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. And what I read inside didn't just expose the truth. It showed that everything I believed about my family, about my entire life, was a lie. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Grandpa's unsteady script. The paper was thin, frayed at the edges, like he had held it many times before finally hiding it away. I slid down onto the cold floor of his office, my back against the cabinet, and began to read. By the second paragraph, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the pages steady. Sandra, he wrote, I need you to know the truth before it's too late. For over 10 years, Emily has been poisoning this family against you. She told your mother that you said she was a bad parent, that you mocked her behind her back. She told your father that you were embarrassed by his job, that you told your friends he was just a factory worker. She told me that you didn't want to visit anymore, that you found me boring and old. I believed her at first. Your parents still believe her, but I started paying attention. I called you and you always answered every single time. And there was love in your voice, Sandra. Real love, not the coldness Emily described. I watched Emily's face when she talked about you and I saw something that chilled me. There was no sadness when she said you had abandoned us. There was satisfaction. She was enjoying it. I stopped reading. My chest felt tight, like someone was pressing down on my ribs. I forced myself to keep going. 2 years ago, the letter continued. Emily came to me with a property transfer document. She said it was routine paperwork for the family trust. She asked me to sign it quickly because the bank was closing soon. Something felt off, so I pretended to sign it but wrote my name slightly different than usual. When the bank reviewed it, they noticed the discrepancy and called me. Sandra, she had forged my signature on a version she created herself. She was trying to transfer the house into her name before I died. The bank rejected it and sent me the original document. I kept it as proof. I never told your parents because I knew they wouldn't believe me. Emily has them wrapped around her finger. So tightly they can't see straight. The final paragraph shattered me. Sandra, you are not the daughter who abandoned this family. You are the daughter who was erased. Emily did this to you deliberately, systematically for over a decade. And I am so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I am so sorry I believed her lies even for a moment. You deserve better from all of us. I love you. I have always loved you. And I hope that one day the truth will set you free. Your grandfather, George. I sat there on that cold floor for a long time. The house was silent around me, but inside my head, everything was screaming. Every memory I had was reshaping itself, twisting into something new and terrible. The family dinners I was never invited to. The birthday calls that went unanswered. The way my mother's voice always sounded tight when I called, like she was bracing for something unpleasant. The way my father couldn't look at me during Grandpa's funeral. It wasn't because I had failed them. It wasn't because I wasn't enough. It was because Emily had spent 10 years convincing them I was a monster. Every cruel story she fed them, they swallowed whole. And not once, not a single time in all those years, did either of my parents pick up the phone and ask me if any of it was true. They accepted Emily's version of me. They let her erase the real Sandra and replace me with a villain in their minds. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the deliberately destroyed daughter. And my own sister had done it with a smile. The grief hit first, then the anger. A deep, scorching anger that started in my stomach and spread through my entire body. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run upstairs, wake my parents, shove the letter in their faces and force them to read every word, but I knew it wouldn't work. Emily had spent a decade building her lies. She would explain this away too. She would say, Grandpa was confused, that his mind was going, that I had manipulated him into writing this. I needed to be smarter. My hands shaking, I pulled out my phone and photographed every page of the letter, front and back, making sure each image was clear. Then I opened my email and wrote to Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's lawyer. I found this letter tonight hidden in my grandfather's belongings. I wrote. I believe you need to see it before tomorrow's reading. I also believe my sister may attempt to contest the will using false evidence. Please keep this confidential until the appropriate time. I will explain everything tomorrow. I attached the photos and hit send. I didn't know if it would matter. I didn't know if anyone would believe me, but I refused to be erased again. If Emily wanted to destroy me, she was going to have to fight for it. I was still sitting on the floor, clutching the letter, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Emily appeared in the doorway in silk pajamas, her hair flawless even now. She had come down for water, but when she saw me there with tears on my face and papers in my hands, she froze, her eyes locking onto the letter. I watched her expression change in a heartbeat, surprise, then calculation, then cold, controlled fury. Give me that, she said. Her voice was calm, but the edge was unmistakable. I stood up slowly, holding the letter behind my back. No, I know what you did, Emily. I know everything. The lies you told Mom and Dad, the things you said about me to Grandpa, the forged signature, I know all of it. Something flickered in her eyes, fear maybe, or irritation that her perfect plan had cracked. Then she lunged. She grabbed my wrist and twisted hard, trying to tear the letter from my hand. I held on with everything I had. Let go, she hissed, her nails digging into my skin. When I didn't release it, she switched tactics. She yanked a fistful of my hair and slammed my head into the wall behind me. The crack echoed through the quiet house. Pain detonated in my skull, white and blinding. My vision smeared, my knees gave out. I slid down the wall and collapsed on the floor, unable to move, unable to think. Through the ringing in my ears, I felt her rip the letter from my weakened fingers. Emily crouched beside me, her face inches from mine. I could smell her perfume, expensive and floral. You think anyone will believe you? She whispered. Her voice was gentle, almost caring, which somehow made it worse. I've spent 10 years making sure they don't. You're nothing, Sandra. You've always been nothing, and after tomorrow, you won't even have Grandpa's money to fool yourself into feeling better. She straightened up, slipped the letter into the pocket of her pajamas, and walked away. Her footsteps disappeared up the stairs. She never once looked back. What Emily didn't realize was that the living room window was wide open because of the summer heat. What she didn't realize was that Martha, restless and unable to sleep, had walked over to check on the house. Martha had been standing in her own yard, just feet from that open window, when she heard the shouting. She saw the struggle. She saw Emily smash my head into the wall. She saw her crouch down and whisper those horrible words. And with shaking hands, Martha pulled out her phone and recorded the final moments of my sister's attack. She had the video now. And she had something else. She had a copy of the letter Grandpa had given her months earlier, with strict instructions to use it only if Emily ever tried to hurt me. Emily walked away that night believing she had destroyed the only proof against her. She had no idea there were 2 copies of that letter, and she had no idea that the woman holding both was going to walk into that lawyer's office the next morning and burn her entire world to the ground. I barely slept that night. My head throbbed where it had hit the wall, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face inches from mine, heard her whisper that I was nothing. When morning came, I forced myself out of bed, took a shower, and put on the most professional outfit I had brought. I studied myself in the mirror. The bruise on my temple was already darkening, but I covered it as best I could with makeup. I didn't have the letter anymore. Emily had taken it. But I had sent the photos to Mr. Harrison, and I had to believe that would be enough. I didn't know yet that Martha had already set something in motion that would change everything. 30 minutes before the will reading was scheduled to begin, Martha Collins walked into Harrison's law office. She was 73 years old, dressed in her best Sunday clothes, carrying a sealed envelope George had given her months before he died. Her hands shook as she placed it on the lawyer's desk. "He told me to only open this if someone tried to hurt Sandra," she said softly. "Last night, someone did." Harrison opened the envelope and read the letter inside. Martha watched his face change with each page. When he finished, she pulled out her phone and showed him the video she had recorded through the open window. The room went silent, broken only by the sound of Emily's voice on the recording, cruel and confident as she spoke those terrible words. Harrison sat quietly for a long moment after the video ended. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "I need you to delay the family's arrival by 15 minutes, he said. "There's something I need to prepare." When the Johnson family arrived at the law office that morning, Harrison was ready for us. I just didn't know it yet. The conference room felt tight and suffocating. I sat alone on one side of the long table, my hands folded in my lap to hide the shaking. My head still pounded, every heartbeat sending pain through my skull. Across from me sat Emily, positioned between our parents like a princess guarded by loyal subjects. She looked flawless, as always. Her hair was styled, her makeup perfect, her expression carefully arranged into dignified grief. In her lap rested a leather folder, and I noticed her fingers kept brushing against it, as if reassuring herself it was still there. Our parents sat with their arms crossed, and when they looked at me, I saw something that cut deeper than any of Emily's words. I saw hostility. After everything, after all those years, they still believed her. They still looked at me like I was the threat. Mr. Harrison entered the room and sat at the head of the table. He was an older man, calm and deliberate, with a face that gave nothing away. He straightened a stack of papers, cleared his throat, and began. "I, George Edward Johnson, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. I leave my home, my savings, and all my worldly possessions to my granddaughter, Sandra Johnson." The silence that followed was total. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Harrison continued, his tone steady. George included a personal statement. He wrote, "Sandra is the only person in this family who never came to me asking for anything. She is also the only one who never lied to me." Emily was on her feet before he finished. Her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice tight and controlled. She opened her leather folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. My grandfather was clearly manipulated in his final months. I have proof right here. Emails from Sandra demanding money, text messages where she threatened to abandon him unless he changed his will. I even have a handwritten note where she admits to pressuring him. She slammed the papers onto the table. This will needs to be contested. My grandfather wasn't in his right mind. I stared at the documents, emails I never sent, texts I never wrote, a note in handwriting that looked like mine but wasn't. She had made it all up. She had spent weeks, maybe months, constructing a case against me with lies and forgeries, and our parents were nodding along, believing every word. Harrison raised his hand calmly. "Before you present your evidence, Ms. Johnson, I have something the family needs to hear." He opened his briefcase and removed an envelope. This letter was written by George Johnson and entrusted to a third party with instructions to deliver it if anyone attempted to harm Sandra or challenge this will. He opened the envelope and began reading aloud. I watched Emily's face as Harrison read Grandpa's words, the lies she had told over the years, the stories she invented to turn our parents against me, the forged property document from 2 years ago. With each sentence, her composure fractured further. Her face drained of color. Her hands clenched the edge of the table. George kept the original forgery as evidence of Emily's character, Harrison said. He anticipated she might try to use fabricated proof to challenge his wishes. He looked directly at my sister. Would you still like to present the contents of your folder, Ms. Johnson? Emily's voice came out thin and strained. That letter is fake. Sandra must have made him write it. She manipulated him. She took advantage of a sick old man. She turned to our parents, desperate now. You believe me, don't you? You know I would never do this. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but my voice didn't shake. I didn't manipulate anyone. But last night, after I found Grandpa's letter, Emily attacked me. She slammed my head into the wall and stole the letter from my hands. She thought she destroyed the only copy. I looked toward the door. She was wrong. The door opened. Martha Collins walked in wearing her Sunday clothes, her expression calm but firm. She was 73 years old and had been George's neighbor and closest friend for more than 40 years. She walked to Harrison's desk and gently set her phone down. I'm Martha Collins, she said, her voice steady. George asked me to watch over Sandra because he knew what was coming. Last night, I saw exactly what his other granddaughter is capable of. Harrison connected the phone to the screen on the wall. The video started to roll. The room sat in rigid silence. There was Emily yanking my hair. There was the instant she smashed my head into the wall. There was her face hovering close as I lay collapsed on the floor. And there was her voice, sharp and unmistakable, saying the words, "You're nothing, Sandra. You've always been nothing." My mother broke into a strangled sob. My father kept his eyes on the floor, unable to look. Emily stood frozen, her mouth hanging open, no sound coming out. The folder stuffed with her manufactured evidence lay forgotten on the table. Everything she had constructed, every lie she had spun, every relationship she had poisoned was falling apart in front of her. I watched my sister and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not victory, just a heavy, bone-deep relief. For 35 years, I believed I was the problem. For 35 years, I wondered what was wrong with me that my own family couldn't love me. Now I knew the truth. It was never me. It was never me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. But the video was only the beginning of Emily's collapse. When investigators went through her evidence folder, they uncovered fabricated emails, altered messages, and forged documents, proof of a deliberate fraud that would cost Emily far more than an inheritance. Everything she had built was about to fall apart. The days after the will reading blurred together in a fog of police interviews, meetings with lawyers, and sleepless nights. I filed assault charges against Emily the morning after that confrontation in Harrison's office. The video Martha had recorded was undeniable. You could see everything clearly, the attack, the theft of the letter, the whispered words that echoed in my head every time I closed my eyes. What began as a straightforward assault case quickly grew into something much larger. Investigators reviewed the contents of Emily's leather folder, the one she planned to use to challenge the will. Forensic specialists traced the emails back to an account Emily had created herself under a fake name. The text messages had been digitally altered, screenshots manipulated to change dates and wording. The handwritten note meant to appear as my writing was examined by a document expert who confirmed it was a forgery. Every piece of evidence she intended to present was a lie she had carefully assembled over weeks, maybe months. The lead prosecutor called me into her office about 3 weeks after everything happened. She was a serious woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone. "This isn't a one-time mistake," she told me, sliding a thick file across her desk. Your sister has been defrauding your family for years. The assault charge is just the beginning. They also reviewed the property transfer document from 2 years earlier, the one where Emily had forged Grandpa's signature. The statute of limitations kept them from charging that act on its own, but they used it to establish what they called a pattern of calculated deception. Emily wasn't just facing assault charges anymore. She was facing attempted fraud, evidence tampering, and possibly more. As the investigation moved forward, the consequences hit Emily faster than anyone expected. Her real estate firm fired her within a week of the video becoming public. Someone leaked it online, and within days it spread through local social media circles. Her employer cited reputational damage and ended her contract immediately. Her boyfriend of 2 years, a successful architect she had been positioning as a future husband, learned the truth about our family. Emily had told him I was the problem. She claimed I had stolen family jewelry when Grandpa became ill. She claimed I had walked away from him in his final months and only returned for the inheritance. When he learned the truth, when he saw the video and read about the forged documents, he cut her off immediately and blocked her number. Friends who once admired her confidence and success started to look at her differently. One by one, they stopped calling back. Invitations to parties and dinners vanished. The woman who always had somewhere important to be suddenly had nowhere to go. She was forced to sell her luxury downtown apartment to cover her growing legal fees. The last I heard, she was renting a small studio on the edge of the city, waiting for her trial date. The woman who spent a decade making me invisible had become someone no one wanted to see. 2 weeks after the will reading, my mother called. Her voice was heavy with tears, barely recognizable. "We didn't know Sandra," she said. "Emily told us so many things over the years. She said, you were angry at us that you didn't want to be part of this family anymore. We believed her. We're so sorry." I stayed silent, letting her words sink in. Part of me had waited 10 years to hear them. Another part felt nothing but exhaustion. When she finished, I spoke. My voice was steady, and I didn't soften what I needed to say. "Mom, I called you every single month for 10 years. Every single month, and every time you sounded like you couldn't wait to hang up. Did you ever even once ask me if what Emily said was true?" Silence on the line. "Did you ever stop to wonder why I would say such awful things about you while I kept calling, kept trying to visit, kept sending birthday cards that were never acknowledged?" More silence. I went on. "I'm not angry at Emily anymore, Mom. She's sick. Something inside her is broken in a way I can't fix and don't want to understand. But I am angry at you and Dad. She lied, yes. But you chose to believe her without ever giving me a chance to defend myself for 10 years. You never once picked up the phone and asked for my side. That's not Emily's fault. That's yours." I heard her crying softly, but I didn't stop. "I need time away from this family. Please don't call me. When I'm ready, I'll reach out." I hung up before she could answer. I sat alone in my apartment for a long time afterward, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of 10 lost years pressing on my chest. 3 weeks later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to see my father standing in the hallway. He looked like he had aged 10 years since the will reading. His shoulders sagged, his eyes were red-rimmed, his hands shook at his sides. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there and began to talk. "I've spent the last 3 weeks going through everything," he said, his voice rough and breaking. "Every phone record, every text you sent that I never answered. Every time you reached out and I ignored you because Emily told me you had said something cruel about your mother." He paused, struggling to continue. "Your grandfather tried to warn me about 2 years ago. He said Emily wasn't who we thought she was. He said something was wrong with her, that she was hurting you. I told him he was confused with age. I told him to stop causing trouble. Tears slid down his weathered face, disappearing into the gray stubble on his chin. I chose her word over his. My own father, and I brushed him aside like he was losing his mind. He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I could have called you once in the last 10 years and asked if any of it was true. One call, that's all it would have taken. But I didn't. I believed what was easier to believe. His voice broke completely. That isn't Emily's fault, Sandra. That's on me. I failed you. I failed my own daughter. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't offer excuses. He didn't try to explain or justify or soften it. He simply stood there, an old man worn down by his own decisions, finally giving me the truth I had waited 35 years to hear. I cried, not because I forgave him. I still didn't know if I could ever fully forgive either of my parents for what they allowed Emily to do to me, but I cried because for the first time in my life, someone in my family finally saw the truth without making me fight for it. Someone believed me without needing a video or a letter or a lawyer to prove I wasn't the monster Emily had painted me to be. I told my father I needed time. He nodded and left without another word. I watched him walk down the hallway toward the elevator, his steps slow, heavy with regret. When I went back to Grandpa George's house a few days later to start sorting through his things, I climbed into the attic to go through old boxes. Behind a stack of dusty photo albums, I found something I hadn't expected. A wooden box with a note taped to the lid in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. It said simply, "For Sandra, when you're ready." I opened it with trembling hands, and what I found inside stole my breath. It held everything he couldn't say while he was alive, and it would finally begin to heal the wounds my family had spent a decade inflicting. The wooden box was old and worn, the kind Grandpa used to build in his workshop when I was little. I carried it downstairs and sat at his kitchen table, the same table where he used to make me hot chocolate on cold winter mornings. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to me. None of them had ever been sent. I picked up the first one and started reading, and by the time I finished, everything finally made sense. 3 months passed between that moment in the attic and the day Emily finally faced judgment. She accepted a plea deal to avoid a public trial that would have exposed every detail of her decade-long manipulation. The criminal terms were harsh but fair. 200 hours of community service, 2 years of probation, $30,000 in restitution paid directly to me, and mandatory psychological counseling for what prosecutors described as pathological deceptive behavior. She stood in that courtroom looking smaller than I had ever seen her, her designer clothes replaced with something plain and forgettable, her perfectly styled hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She never looked at me once during the proceedings. Separately, the Oregon Real Estate Agency conducted its own investigation into her professional conduct, the fabricated documents, the fraud, the long-established pattern of deception. All of it disqualified her from holding a license in the state. Her real estate certification was permanently revoked. The career she built, the success she flaunted at every family gathering, the deals our parents celebrated while ignoring my quiet achievements, all of it vanished. With no career, no savings left after legal fees, no friends willing to stand by her, and no family offering shelter, Emily had nowhere to go. She eventually moved to a small town in Nebraska to live with a distant cousin she barely knew. I heard that from Martha, who still kept track even after everything ended. For the first time in her life, my sister had nothing. No audience, no family to manipulate, no sister to step on to feel taller. She would have to find out who she really was without defining herself by being better than me. That was her real punishment. And maybe, if she ever truly changed, it would also be her only chance at redemption. But that was her path now, not mine. I had my own life to rebuild. The letters in Grandpa George's box became my most precious possession. There were letters about my college graduation. He wrote that he had driven 3 hours just to watch me cross the stage, sitting in the back row because he was afraid of causing tension with my parents. He said he cried when they called my name. There were letters about my first job at the senior center. Martha had told him, and he wrote that he was so proud he couldn't sleep that night. There were letters about the charity drive I organized for homeless veterans 2 years ago, something I had never mentioned to anyone. He had seen my picture in the local newspaper and clipped it out. He carried it in his wallet. One letter dated 5 years ago made me cry so hard I couldn't catch my breath. He wrote, "Emily told your parents, you were ashamed of this family and wanted nothing to do with us. But I saw you wearing your grandmother's necklace in every photo Martha showed me. I knew the truth, Sandra. A daughter who hated her family wouldn't wear her grandmother's necklace over her heart. I always knew." Another letter written just months before he passed said, "You don't need them to see you, sweetheart. I see you. I have always seen you. And I am so proud of the woman you've become. Not despite your family, but in spite of them. That takes a strength most people will never understand. I chose to keep Grandpa's house, not to live in, but as a refuge I could return to whenever the world felt too heavy. I spent my weekends restoring it slowly, the way he would have wanted. I repainted the porch he loved, choosing the same blue he had used for as long as I could remember. I planted flowers in the garden he once tended, the same kinds he always picked. I hung his photos and frames throughout the rooms, filling the house with reminders of the man who never stopped believing in me. I also created something I called the George Johnson Foundation. It was a scholarship fund for young people who had been overlooked, dismissed, or isolated by their families, but kept going anyway. The first recipient was a young woman from rural Oregon whose story mirrored mine in so many ways. She was the unfavored child, blamed for everything, the one who succeeded despite being told she never would. When I handed her the scholarship check, she cried and hugged me and said no one had ever believed in her before. I told her someone always had. She just hadn't met them yet. With my parents, I set clear and firm boundaries. I allowed limited contact, but only when I initiated it. Only in public places, and never if they mentioned Emily or made excuses for her behavior. Our first meeting was at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground where I felt safe. My mother looked fragile, older than I remembered, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she never drank. My father sat rigid and quiet, his eyes red from what I suspected were many sleepless nights. I told them exactly where I stood. "You don't get credit for finally believing me," I said. "You get the chance to prove you've changed. That chance can be revoked at any time. Do you understand?" My mother nodded, tears running down her face. My father simply said, "We understand. We'll earn it." Whether they actually would remain to be seen. But for the first time in my life, the terms were mine. On a warm September evening, I stood on the porch of Grandpa's house, watching the sunset wash the sky in shades of orange and gold. The old oak tree he planted the year I was born stretched its branches toward the fading light, leaves whispering in the breeze. I held the last letter from the box, dated just 2 weeks before he died, when his hands could barely hold a pen. The writing was shaky, some words nearly illegible, but I had read it so many times I knew it by heart. "My sweet Sandra," he wrote, "if you're reading this, then the truth has finally surfaced. I only wish I were there to witness it. I'm sorry I couldn't shield you while I was still alive. I was scared of breaking this family apart, but I see now that Emily had already destroyed it long ago. She just made sure you carried all the blame. You are not the daughter who was never enough. You are not the daughter who didn't try hard enough. You are not the daughter who failed. You are the daughter who was taken from us. And that burden was never yours to bear. It belongs to them. Go live your life now, sweetheart. Not to prove anything to anyone. Just live because you have earned the right to happiness. I love you. I have always loved you, and wherever I am endlessly proud of you. Forever yours, Grandpa. I folded the letter with care and held it tight against my chest. The evening air carried the smell of oak leaves, freshly cut grass, and something faintly like his old cologne. For 35 years, I believed I didn't deserve my family's love. Now I finally understood. I was always worthy. They were the ones who failed, and I no longer needed them. I didn't need anyone else to tell me I was enough. I already knew. Sandra's story reminds us of something we often forget. The people who love us should never make us feel invisible. If your family treats you like a stranger, if they accept lies without ever asking for your side, that is not your failure. That is theirs. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be believed, and you deserve relationships where your voice matters. Sometimes the hardest thing we can do is set boundaries with the people who raised us. But boundaries are not punishment. They are protection. They teach others how to treat us, and they remind us that our peace is worth defending. You do not owe anyone unlimited access to your life, especially those who have used that access to hurt you. If this story touched your heart, if it echoed your own journey or someone you love, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Have you ever uncovered a truth that changed everything you believed? Share your experience with us.